Here is something that I have started incorporating into every single project that I build and that I want to show you how you can leverage. Alrighty? So what we're gonna do is switch over to the screen and I tried to find a universal example, and I think the closest to that would be the Azure resume. I didn't know that ls works. ls-l does not work. Oh, it's because I'm in PowerShell. Okay. So anyway, we're gonna move into the Azure resume, and I chose this example to set this up because I feel like it's like the cloud project that the majority of people are familiar with. And you see we have a Docker compose file. We have a folder for our front end. We have a folder for our back end. And then we have a GitHub folder with our actions for CI/CD. And then now we have this dev container folder. So we're gonna open this up in code. If you didn't know, you can use code dot as long as you're in the directory, and it'll open it up in VS Code. Or you can do code and then provide the path, and it'll do that for you too. I'm gonna close everything that comes up here, and we're gonna first focus on the project here. So you again might be familiar with the resume challenge, specifically the cloud resume challenge, specifically this time with the Azure one. I made the original video like 2 or 3 years ago, and I've made a significant amount of updates in the project for this video. So if you're getting stuck, you might find some updates here that will help you. But yeah, when you're working with the project, or when you're working with a lot of projects, to be honest, oftentimes you find yourself having like a folder for your API, and I have everything that my folder builds in here. You may have a folder for your front end, so for your website, right? And you have this here. And then you have folders for other things, right? But also when you're working in VS Code, you have your local environment. So this is where I am working locally. You can tell that I'm not connected to anything because this is the status icon down here. It doesn't say that it's connected to anything, so I'm local. And all of my extensions are the ones that are installed locally, we can see here. I have a .NET tool here. I have some Azure Functions tools here. I have some C# stuff here, right? And again, this is again working locally. Now, let me show you why this could potentially be a problem. It can be confusing because of versions, right? So for example, I can do .NET dash version, and on here I have 8. But if we look at my API, api.csproj, we see it's working with .NET 7. So we need a different version of .NET. Now I could go ahead and install a different version and then swap it in and out. Or I could leverage this amazing thing called dev containers. I'm going to show you how it works first, and then we're going to talk about the configuration itself. So I'm going to hit Control-Shift-P. Actually, let me make sure Docker is running. Docker is running. Okay, you need Docker for this. Control-Shift-P. I'm going to say reopen in container. And then you see here I have 2 options, right? I've configured this to have a container for my .NET API and then my JavaScript frontend. Ready? I'm just going to bring that up again. Control-Shift-P, reopen in container, .NET API. All right. So you might be familiar with working with containers, with developing your solutions and deploying them in containers. But this takes it to the next step where you're actually developing your code inside of a container. So your code environment, this VS Code environment, exists within a container. What's cool about this is you can take it a step forward and actually work inside the exact environment that your code is going to be deployed in. So as an I'm going to click restart language server. That's probably why I'm getting this issue here. But yeah, if you're deploying to an Ubuntu container, a specific version, you can also choose to develop inside of that. And again, I'll show you this in a little bit. All right, we're going to close all this. And now if I go to the left side, this folder side, you see here that I only have the folders that matter to working with the API. So I have some VS Code files here. So this is for launching, debugging. Then I have my CS files, which are all the code, right? C#. I have a local.settings, which is for the function. And then I have also the setup sh that I have configured here. And then for extensions too, you can see that, okay, these are extensions that I have locally, but the extensions that I have inside of my dev container may be similar, may not be, but I can have them be different. And you also see that my dev container is what I'm connected to. So you see it says here editing on devcontainer.net API. If I do bring up the terminal and I do .NET -- version, you see here I have .NET 7, right? Which was different than that original version that I have locally. And of course, in here I can do func host start because I have a startup script that configures Azure Functions core tools to be working here. We're going to let that run. But I love this. I no longer do stuff locally. I just always work from inside of a container. So what I'm going to do is Control C, and then I'm going to go into this extension that I have called Thunder Client. I've configured this container to have this for me. And I'm going to hit new request and then just paste in our API. And this is an extension that allows us to make API requests from within VS Code. And you can see here that we are getting the response from our API without having to go to a different window. I love being able to work with just within VS Code. Like I don't need to be moving around that much, right? Now, usually we're going to stop this here, right? And then we can just go run debug. I have a configuration for my debugger here. I can do attach to .NET functions. Failed to find func host start task. Why is that happening? Let's go over here, right here. Oh, it doesn't have a label. Let me add this then. Label. No, the label is, oh no. The tasks, func host start, attach to .NET func. Actually, that's right. Hold on. Let me see. Let me remove this line here. Func host start. What is it looking for? Func host start, but it's right here. All right, run it once more. Close this, attach. That's fine. That's fine. Failed to find func host start task. Maybe I need to copy paste. Was there an extra space in there or something? Let's see. It's looking for this task here, but the task isn't here, so not really sure why it's failing. Try once more. Okay, that worked for some reason. That's got to be a bug. I'm going to have to file that. But anyway, yeah, I can, instead of typing in the command, I can configure VS Code tasks to do it for me. And you see this is pretty much the same as running func host start. And you can get really, I mean, this is more a VS Code thing than a container thing, but you can add like, oh, do you want your solution you want to run .NET clean before you run func host start? Like you can configure that to happen in here if you want to. Okay, so I'm going to let this stay in the background. I'm going to open up my terminal again, and I'm going to go do command, the code dot command once more. And we're back at our normal Azure Functions. We have our front end, we have our API, right? And what I'm going to do now is Control-Shift-P, reopen in container, and this time I'm going to select the JS front end, all right? And then this is now going to load up a folder in VS Code and extensions and configuration, all that good stuff, just with the stuff that I need to work for my front end, okay? So I'm going to close everything just so we can take a better look at what's going on. You see here, you don't see anything about my API over here. You don't see, we're talking about this area here. You don't see, yeah, it's only stuff that works for my front end, right? Same with the extensions. If I go to extensions, you see that in the dev container, in the container that I'm working on, I really only have this JavaScript one and this live preview, and I'll show you that in a second. And I don't need anything else in there. I don't need it keeps it like clean, which I like. Now, into my index.html. One of the extensions I have installed is called Live Preview. I can select this button right here and it generates that live preview right here, and I don't need to go to the browser, which I like. And you can see this is working. Let me open the JavaScript file. I've set it to work locally, local function API, and then I've also set it here. And I just swap these out for when it's in production to work with my local host. And if I open my dev container here, or my API, I guess, you're gonna see that it's. I'm gonna refresh it quickly. Just pay attention to the terminal here. Oh, actually, I don't think I'll be able to. We gotta do this other way around. I just want you to see that it's actually they're talking to each other. So I'm gonna hit refresh here, and you see that the terminal said here, oh, the function was executed. So they're talking to each other, and I don't have to like have two different GitHub repos or anything like that. No, it's the same. It's all in one project, and I'm going to show you how this is configured right now. Okay, so I'm going to close this. I'm going to close this, and then we're going to go back to the full project, and we're not going to open any dev containers. I could show you what Docker looks like too. Go to the dashboard, and we can see we have the Azure Resume project here, right? And then I have a container for my API and a container for my front end. And you can see that the images that they're running on, right? All right, awesome. So back here, we're going to talk a little bit about what makes this stuff possible. I'll close this. We're going to close the API folder and the front end. And we're going to focus first on the dev container folder. So let's make this a little larger. You can see on .dev container, I have a folder API and a folder front end. And these are corresponding to those projects, obviously, that I have, right? My API project, my front-end project. I'm going to expand both of them. And inside both of them, I have this file called devcontainer.json. And this is what sets up the configuration for that environment that you want, right? So we'll move that over here. We have one for each service because we need different features and personalization and stuff like that. And again, we'll talk about it. First thing is the name. So remember when I did Control-Shift-P, reopen in container, it gives me the name. That's the value here. And you can name this whatever it is. We'll talk about your Docker Compose in a little bit, but you have to also, if you're working with a Docker Compose file, you have to point to which Docker Compose file you're working with. If you are extending your Docker Compose, which is I should probably do that, but it's a good practice. So you can leverage Docker Compose files that are for your development environment. You would add it here because this is a list, right? And then you need to point to what the service name is in your Docker Compose. So in my Docker Compose, this service name is called API. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You need to tell what the workspace for VS Code is. In this case, mine is workspace./API, which corresponds to, okay, I want you to load everything that is in this folder for my workspace. And that's why when you load up your VS Code in a certain container, it only shows the folders that are within what you define here. Right. Now, other things that I have here is shutdown action none. This means that if I close one of remember when I had both of them open, if I were to close one, the other one wouldn't close. Nothing it wouldn't. They're not linked in a way where one container, when you shut down one, it shuts down the container, and then the other one would shut down as well. Actually, they are linked. But what I'm saying is that nothing would happen. But again, we'll talk about them in the Docker Compose, okay? And then customization. Here I have a list of extensions that I feel are important for the API. And you can see I had Azure Functions, C#, Thunder Client, which is that API request tool that I showed you. I have Copilot because I use Copilot and everything, and the CS Dev Kit. And then I also have a post create command, which what I'm saying is, okay, go to this file, setup.sh. First, change the permissions and then run it. And the setup.sh just installs Azure Function core tools. Nothing super special there. And that's kind of it. Now let's go to the one for the front end. And you see something similar again. Different name. It points to the Docker Compose. And then the service in the Docker Compose called front end. And then the only extension I have is live server. I think the ESL one, the lint, the linter is installed by default. So anyway, after that, I again have shutdown action none because they are linked. If you want to close one but keep working the other one, you don't want one shutting one down, shutting the other one down. That's what I meant to say in the first time. Okay, cool. So we have those two folders, right? The other thing that's important, and if you had more services, you would just right click new folder and you would add a folder there and a dev container in there too. Now, the other file that matters here is this Docker Compose. Okay, so you see we have two services, API and front end, which correspond to those same projects, so same folders. And remember that in the dev container.json file, the services were, one was pointing to API, one was pointing to the front end. So it matters that those match too. Then we're saying, okay, the dev container for the API is based off this image, which in this one is .NET. The dev containers have a couple of templates, like actually a bunch of templates that you can leverage, and I just pulled the one that was appropriate for this one. If you had like TypeScript or you had like Go or whatever, you would probably have to use another one. You'd find that. But in this case, since my project is a .NET 7 project, I use this one, right? Now, the volumes is what allows the container to know what the workspace is and allows Git operations. So that's why it's set to, if you have your git folder at the root level, you just need to point it there, which it's what usually happens. I'm going to make this a little larger here. Sleep infinity, so the container keeps running in the background. Again, to avoid those like, oh, it goes to sleep when you're not working, whatever, okay? Links. This means that we are linking, so the front end, the API is linked to the front end service, and they can see each other, see that each of these containers exist. And then networks is, I'm pointing both to the same networks, and this allows networking between both of these containers. As you know, Docker containers are isolated environments, so they have within themselves networking and their own like network. They live in their own network type thing. They're not supposed to be able to by default talk to other things. That's where the security comes into play. But by creating your own network and then pointing them both to that same network, they can talk to each other, which is why my service, my front end service, so that website with the counter that you saw was able to trigger the function worked because we have this networking set up here. Okay. And then similar for the front end, again, pointing to a different image. In this one, we're using a TypeScript dash node. Volumes is the same, the command is the same, and the networks is the same. I don't have to use the links key here because this one already has it in here. But they can both talk to each other and they can both see each other because of these keys. And finally, I have networks, mynet, and it's the driver. It's just a configuration to have these both be able to talk to each other. You can see that networks points to mynet, networks points to mynet, and I define mynet down here. Alrighty. So that's the most important part here. And if we go back to dev containers, we see that we're telling this, okay, your Docker Compose is this file, which is this file here. And they both point to the same one, which is important because you need communication. Now, this is why this works. And if you are working with the Azure Resume, I should mention, I updated the Azure Resume project to work with .NET 7, and there's some changes there in the code that you can go and take a look. The link to this repo will be in the description. Now, I also will say is sometimes you don't need as a involved or complicated, it's not complicated, but complex example. So we can we'll just create another, we'll just do a test project and we'll move into this test project. Oh no, wrong one. CD test project, and then we'll open code in here. So this is just a blank project, right? What you can do, but say we want to work with Python. Do I have Python installed? I don't know if I have Python installed. We do Python dash this version. Does that work? Python? No, I don't. I don't think I have Python version. Do I have Python 3? I don't have Python either. Okay, so I don't have Python installed, as you can see, which is fine. I don't want to install it locally. But what I can do here is I can do Control-Shift-P, and I can type in dev containers, add dev container configuration file. And then it's going to walk you through, well, what template do you want to use? I'm going to type in Python because I want to work with Python 3. But if you need other things, there's like so many templates out there. I'm going to use Python 3 and I'm going to stick to, let's do 3.11. Then any additional tools I can add there if I want to, but I don't want to. Alrighty. So now it creates this .dev container folder and this dev container.json, and we're going to reopen this. It's going to reload your window, but you can see now at the bottom it says opening remote, and this is going to reload again in the context of your Python project. Alrighty. So now if I do bring up the terminal, I can do Python, and I have Python here. See? I didn't have to install anything locally. And if I create a new folder, a new file, new Python file, and we just say, no. What is it? Print hello world. Hello world. Or I can't type today. And it should not use the first line as the name. Say main, hello, right? And then now I do Python main, and it prints out hello world, right? And then at any point I can just close this, and again back to this is my local terminal. Do Python here. It shouldn't work. Yeah, it brings up the store to install it. And there you have it. So yeah, hopefully this works. I love this. I use this with all my projects now. I don't install anything locally. I can just go from working on this computer to the Mac to the other desktop to whatever I need to, and I don't have to worry about my local environments at all. You can also leverage this with code spaces, so you can have a development environment in the cloud. There's so many possibilities here. So check this out. Highly recommend you incorporate this for your own projects in the context of like being a beginner and trying to learn like what it is to work in a professional environment or like in a role. Oftentimes you'll see configurations and like different configurations, and understanding how to leverage things like dev containers, things like VS Code, all this kind of stuff will only put you a step ahead of trying to figure that out when you're at like the gig. A lot of companies use dev containers. It's a very popular tool. And it's once you understand how it works, it's not that complicated. I know it seems like a lot of configuration at the beginning, but trust me, once you get into the habit of using them and you understand how they work, you're never going to run into version issues anymore, which is just like the biggest thing for me. All right, anyway, this is a long video, but hopefully you learned something. And I will see you in the next video.